Okay, sorry about that. I didn't like the way my PowerPoint was looking, so I wanted to change it a little bit. Um, so, kind of done with constitutions and want to start talking about statutes. So, statutes are in some ways easier to read and analyze than cases, and sometimes they're harder. So, they're shorter. Um, but sometimes they're very specific and they use peculiar words. So you really, really have to read them. And maybe it's not as interesting as reading case law. So we're going to work on analyzing statutes a little bit. Okay, so first thing that you want to figure out maybe is, does this law apply? So you want to look to the language of the statute. So this is the OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, or Occupation and Safety and Health Act, 29 USC 653A, and it says it should apply here. So it's basically any state, DC, Puerto Rico, Canal Zone, whatever. So if I'm not in one of those areas, then this statute doesn't apply to me. Okay, so geographically, does it apply to me, or does it apply to me does it apply to employers, employees? Those are things you want to look at. Who does it apply to? Sometimes you can figure out where the law, whether it applies depending on where the law is in the organization of the code. So if I'm looking at a criminal code section, it's not going to apply in a civil case. Civil procedure doesn't apply in a criminal case. So figure out, whether that applies, figuring out where it is in the organization of the code. One of the things it's also important to do is look at subsections. So let me get to all right, so I'm looking at, this is Rule 4 of the Federal Rules of Procedure, okay? And this is about service process. How do I serve someone a complaint in a lawsuit? So depending upon who the person I'm serving is, my rules are going to be different. So just an individual in the United States, an individual in a foreign country, if I'm serving a minor, if I'm serving an entity that's not a person, like a corporation, serving someone in the government, right? Depending on who that individual is, there's going to be a different law that applies. Okay, so that's just something you want to look at. Make sure you check your subsections. And if you're citing to it, make sure you cite your subsections. Okay, don't just cite Rule 4. You want Rule 4, Section H, to point the reader and yourself to the correct section, so you don't have to do the same amount of work twice looking through everything. Okay, yeah. So this is Rule 4 in the Cornell site to look at it. Okay, so these are the contents of the rules. You must have all of these things. The name of the court and the parties has to be directed to the defendant, all of the requirements. So all of those things have to be there. Generally service, who may serve. You must be a party, someone who is 18 years old and not a party. A lot of subsections. So it's not so, yes, and this is the part we were looking at. Individual within a judicial district of the United States. Okay, this is what you have to do. Foreign country, this is what you have to do. Minor or incompetent person. So there's more steps. Okay, so you have to go through these subsections in parts, figure out which one actually applies to you, and then from there you can see what the rules are for you. Okay, so statutes, you read through it once, you're like, I don't understand it. Look through it again. What specifically are you looking for? Who does it apply to? What is the timing? What is the form? What are the elements? What are you looking for? Statutes sometimes provide rights. Sometimes they provide for liability or obligations. You have to put it in a format that helps you understand. So one of the things that the textbook is suggesting that you do is outline it. Okay, so here, what are the things that you need? Timing, affidavit. This is something that we're going to be doing in the homework, kind of going through these statutes and putting through the general requirements. So here's our form and content. It has to be in writing, stating the grounds, the relief requested, right? So they're just pulling out, getting rid of the gobbledygook and showing you what the meat and potatoes is. What's the outline? What do we have to do? So it's a helpful way to figure out what the statute is saying and seeing if it applies in your situation. Okay, once you have all of this, it's like a checklist. Okay, my motion, I have to have it in writing. Okay, I can't just do a verbal motion. I have to say my grounds. Is there a rule I'm using, or is there a theory that I'm using for my grounds for my motion? What do I want? Okay, do I want something dismissed? Do I want a piece of evidence entered, or do I want a piece of evidence not entered? And then I need affidavits. I need some evidence supporting it. Okay, when can I do it? All of that stuff. Okay. So this is the one where they're talking about it's a federal statute making it a crime to be an accessory after the fact. The code says, okay, so it's just a sentence. Whoever knowing that offense has been committed, blah, 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 is an accessory after the fact. So how do we put this into our elements? Okay, they know that an offense was committed. They receive, relieve, comfort, or assist the offender. So they do something to help. And that was given to hinder or prevent the apprehension, trial, or punishment of the bad person, the person who did it. Okay, so you've gotten this one sentence, and now you have a little outline. You have your checklist of the elements for the statute to apply. Call them elements. We call them statutory requirements. I like to call them elements. Okay, so this is another statutory section, 18 U.S.C. 242, which is, I think it's on page 145 of Hamy's. Oh, it is 145. I'm looking at it right there. Okay, so look at there's like 4 sentences here. Whoever under color of any law, statute, ordinance, regulation, or custom willfully blah, blah, blah. So you can't deprive someone of rights under color of law. Okay, so how do we, what's this paragraph and how do we get it into elements? So someone must act under the color of law, willfully depriving someone of rights or subject to different punishments. And look at these words in bold. The ands and the ors are super important. Okay, the ands are the musts and the ors are the alternatives. One of those things has to appear for it to apply. Okay, so you have to pay attention to these little words. Shall, but, except, unless, and, or. Okay, they're super, super important. And when you're doing your little outline or list of elements, make sure you include those little words. Okay, let me get back to my PowerPoint. Outlining our statute. Okay, what are the elements? And then the next thing that we're going to be looking at are these statutory annotations to see how it's been interpreted by courts. Okay, so here, remember our little words are super important, and especially our dates, effective dates, changes, things that, as of a certain date, things might change. Little words are super important. Okay, so we've gotten our statute, we've gotten our outline or our list of elements, and then sometimes there's phrases and we don't know what they mean. And what a court can do is help explain or clarify the meaning of words and phrases in a statute. So back to our 18 U.S.C. 242, where they talk about the color of law, like what does that mean? So when you look at a statute in a not when you're going to just the US code, but when you're looking at a book or you're looking at something on Lexis or Westlaw, you'll have the statutory section, and then you'll have what's called annotations. So the annotations are little summaries or blurbs about cases that have interpreted that code section, and they help you explain or clarify the meaning of terms or words in that statute. Okay, so if we go back to Hamey's here, okay, here we go. So we would have that code section that we looked at a couple of pages earlier under this, this section of color of law. Okay, so this little paragraph. But then after that, they have these case notes or annotations. And so what constitutes deprivation of rights protected by the federal Constitution? Okay, so here's a bunch of cases that talk about that. So you look at that and you're like, well, this could be helpful. And then you go pull that case and you read it and you see how the court interprets the phrase deprivation of rights or under color of law. See, we have all of these cases that interpret what that means. So when you're doing statutory law, yeah, you're looking at the statute, you're outlining it or listing the elements. But then the second step to your research is to go to these annotations and find cases and see how they've been interpreted. And then once they're interpreted, right, we have our concept of stare decisis, which I think is on the previous page here. So the interpretation by a court of what this language is here it is precedent, right? It's binding on future courts to see what these words actually mean. Okay, so say we've gone through, we've listed our elements, we've cleared up what terms mean to see if they apply. Another way to figure out what terms in a statute mean is from the statute itself. Some statutes may have a section with definitions of terms that are contained in the statutes. We call that the definition section. Okay, so you can look here if they say, well, let me just get to this page here. I don't really want to be there. Sorry. Okay, so this is something about Homeland Security. 6 U.S.C. 101 has this definition section. This is going to be on your quiz. I'm going to give you a definition section of a statute, and you're going to have to tell me if something applies. But, what does homeland mean? Oh, it means the United States. Okay. It doesn't mean like my house, right? Because it's not clear. What does the department mean? Here it means the Department of Homeland Security. Right? It gives you all of these. So if they talk about terrorism in this act, then you can know what terrorism means, what they're trying to talk about. Okay, so that's definition sections are super duper duper helpful. Okay. Oh, this is just an aside. Remember when you're citing to a U.S. statute, we have the title, the name of the book, then our section symbol, and then the number, if there's a subpart, and then your parentheses. If we're looking at it just at the U.S. code on a government page, we don't need a publisher. And then our date of publication. So internet sites are going to be the current year. It's not the year it was enacted. It's the year it was published, the year that you're looking at. So here, 29 U.S.C., section 206, 221. Okay, so it's kind of easier than cases. Just remember this to keep the date. The date is important because that tells the reader, okay, I looked at that statute in 2021 and that's what it was. So if I'm reading this in 2025, the statute may have changed. It may have been amended in one way or another. So the content of the statute would be different. So that's why the date is important. Oh, so here's a little practice listing the elements, just like we did for the under color of law. Okay, so this is the Illinois Dram Shop Act. Every person who is injured within the state by an intoxicated person has a right of action. Okay, so let's start. Our elements. Who does this apply to? A person injured in the state. Okay, and then personal or property by an intoxicated person. Okay, so that's the first part, who it applies to. Next part, what can they do? They have a right of action severally or jointly. Who can they sue? A person licensed to sell alcohol, who sold or gave alcohol, right? Here's one of those little words, the or, and that caused the intoxication of this person back there. Okay, so that's, I mean, I don't have numbers on it, but it's just another way of getting my elements, figuring out what this is. Okay, so this is a paragraph. This is longer, but maybe it's easier to understand. And that's going to be part of your homework, listing the elements in certain sections of the Illinois Code. Okay, so this is an example of the federal minimum wage law. And here, what's important to look at, okay, this is employees are entitled to a federal minimum wage. But look at this, okay? So look, there's 3 different wages. So what are we, and this is actually kind of topical because they're talking about raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour, the federal minimum wage. Every state can have their own minimum wage. It just cannot be less than the federal minimum wage, right? You can grant more rights in a state, but not fewer rights. So any state without a minimum wage law, it is current, their minimum wage is currently $7.25 an hour, which is the federal minimum wage. Okay, so that, it was in 2007 in May, it was $5.85. A year after that, it went to $6.55, and 2 years after that, it went to $7.25. Okay, so the dates are important there. That's what's important to look at there. Statutes of limitation. This is the Illinois Statutes of Limitation. When you can bring a cause of action, you know, you can't bring a tort action 20 years after the date. There's limits. They're called statutes of limitation. So it's super complex here. Okay, so these are for real property. Okay, and then different recovery of land, blah, blah, blah. And let's look for personal injury as I go down. Real estate. Okay, personal actions. Okay, so defamation, 1 year, personal injury, 2 years, you know, so forth, you know, sexual abuse, all of these different kinds. So it's a lot to look through. So you have to kind of figure out what you're looking for and browse through these statutes and find the one that applies. So you have to read through to find your particular cause of action, and then from there you can find out what the statute, what the limitation is. If you have a statute and a case that appear to conflict in law, like our Peterson one, okay, so usually a newer statute would control over an older case. Okay, so you have an older case, and then the lawmakers go forth and pass something because they don't like that law. They don't like what the courts have found. So usually the newer statute would control. Because, and then if the courts don't like that, then the courts can invalidate it if they say it's unconstitutional. If it's a constitutional issue, case law usually prevails. So usually if there's just a common law doctrine, a statute will win over that. Peterson is an exception because that was a matter of court procedure, and then courts were given jurisdiction over that, over our elected lawmakers. Okay, I'm going to pause this one and start a new lecture. I mean, a new video.